What's up, guys? Welcome to Kerbal Space Program. My name is Sporks. I'm going to give you a brief overview of what this game is. It's developed by Squad. It is an indie title. It is a sandbox style space simulator in which you design, build, and launch different crafts, be it space planes or rockets or satellites, what have you. There's a huge community following. When I say huge, that's relative. It's a very active forums, and there's a lot of modders and everything that love this game. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and jump in. I'm going to show you the basics. I already have a save file in here right now, so we're going to go ahead and just jump in. And the first time you load it up, you'll see there is a tutorial. There should be in the vehicle assembly building that'll walk you through the basics of building a simple rocket. But we're going to go ahead and skip that. I'm just going to show you just a very simple rocket design. And if you look in the top left corner, you'll see there's different command pods. The top three are usually reserved for space planes. The middle ones are for rockets, and the bottom ones are usually used for probes or satellites. But with that said, you can use them for whatever you want, whenever you want. The game doesn't restrict you to that. So we're gonna go ahead and just use this basic little Mark 1 command pod. It's kind of like the Mercury pod from the old school NASA days, the 50s and 60s, I believe. And another thing you'll notice is the different tabs up here. You can add more pods, more command modules and stuff. This is the propulsion. You have your engines and fuel tanks. Then you have control. We'll get into that more later. Structural, which is for like struts and things like that, decouplers, adapters. You got your aerodynamic, which is mainly space planes, but you can use this stuff with rockets as well for like fins and things like that. Your utility, things like ladders, parachutes, docking ports, batteries, lights, solar panels, things like that. And then you have your scientific, which not too much use for it just yet. This game is in early stages of development. It is alpha. These four, the accelerometer, thermometer, graviola detector, which is it detects different gravitational fields, and your barometer. All of these three, they do work, but there's really no functionality. It doesn't, that doesn't pertain to anything. It will tell you the speed you're traveling in relation, or the gravity, how strong the gravity is where you're at, what the temperature is, the atmospheric pressure, things like that. It will work, but it doesn't really apply to anything. There's no real use for them. And the communitrons, these the dishes and the antenna, there's no way to use them. They're just pretty much for looks right now, but I'm sure there is plans to implement things later down the road. And if you look up right here, you have action groups, which I'm not going to go into too much detail right now. Pretty much you can set up things to happen by, if say I press my 1 key on my keyboard and I want an abort sequence to happen, you can set it up this way. What you want to happen whenever you click abort, say you have a decoupler and some solid rocket boosters, whatever, to get you away from an exploding rocket or whatever. Action groups, you can do tons of different things with them. You can even set up your own custom ones. Say if you want a big fancy solar array with a bunch of different solar panels to open up at the same time, you can set that up to custom one, and that'll happen whenever you press your number 1 key. Things like that. Very important, very very useful tool you want to get familiar with, but we're not going to get into that too much today. So with that said, let's move right along. Let's go ahead and go to utility and slap a parachute on our command module. And as soon as I do that, you'll notice down here in our staging area, the parachute symbol applies. You're going to want to keep an eye on the staging sequence, and you're going to want to move it around to your liking. The default settings of the way it adds things, it's not very intuitive sometimes, so you always want to double check and triple check your staging and make sure it's exactly the way you want it. So always keep an eye on that. So this is going to be the command pod that actually re-enters the Earth, so we're going to want to have everything in this stage. This is the last stage. You can't go any further than this. So I'm going to go ahead and slap together a simple rocket and probably speed it up a little bit and let you see. But explain it afterwards. So I'll get back right with you. Alright, so as you can see right here, if you hover over any part in the vehicle that's in the building, it'll highlight, and if you hover over here, you can actually see where it is in relative to your staging. So you can hover over the parachute, or you can do it up here and you can see it highlight over there. So what I usually do to check my staging is I'll hover over the engine, and that's at the bottom, and then scroll up to the decoupler, and it highlights, okay, that's stage 3. And there's an engine under here. One feature that is added to the game, which is amazing, is if you add a decoupler to a engine, it automatically puts a shroud over it, which is awesome. It makes it look 10 times better. So so far staging is correct. What I'm going to go ahead and do is slap one of these bad boys on here, and I'm going to hold shift and click, and that selects the whole ship, and I'm going to move it down a little bit, and I'm going to press X, which changes my symmetry. Shift X lowers it, regular X erases it, C turns on angle snap, turns it off. You can also click. Alright, I have 2 times symmetry, so it gets replicated on the opposite side. And these are radial decouplers. What this does is it allows me to add things to the side, and with a press of a button, whenever I get here, it'll decouple these whenever these burn out. So now we're going to play around with the staging. What I want to happen is this stability enhancer, this little support right here, I want that to go off, to decouple at the same time that these rockets fire. But I don't want these rockets to fire until after I have my main engine throttled up. So I'll put that at the bottom. So what we have right now is the main engine. We're going to press space, and that's going to ignite. We're going to wait for that to fully throttle up. Then we're going to press space again. These solid rocket boosters are going to fire, and this tower right here is going to decouple, and we're going to have liftoff. So the other staging is correct. I've already checked that. We're going to go ahead and rename this to Sporks 1. Alright, we're going to save that, and we're going to get it out to the launch pad. Alright, so we are all loaded up. We're in the flight scene now. There's a couple different things to pay attention to. You notice that our staging gets moved over here. You got your time acceleration, which is handy on long flights, your altimeter, and your lights and gears and brakes, and your atmosphere reading. Another important thing right here is your resources. It obviously shows all your resources, your fuel, your electric charge. If you ever run out of electric charge, you're dead in the water. There's no way to have control unless you somehow get more electric charge, which you can do with docking or solar panels or things like that. You have your stage indicator. Right now it's showing that the next time I press spacebar, it's going to initiate stage 6, and it'll keep going down the line. Your different views, you can go into docking view, which is very handy for when you're docking. I actually don't use this view. I still use the old school translation controls for RCS, but this is probably pretty handy because it does let you use ASWD for that, but I don't use that. And if you press M or click right here, you go to the orbital map, which is a very, very important view. It lets you see your orbit, obviously, in relation to other planets, and help you set up different maneuvers and stuff like that. But we're not going to get too big into maneuvers right now. That's for another day. So right now, Ganeski Kerbin, he's going to be our guinea pig. What we're going to do is press T to turn on SAS, which that does is it's going to keep us in the position we're in. It's going to keep us traveling in the same direction, so that's good. Shift to control to throttle up and down. X completely kills engines, which is very important. What we're going to do is go ahead and throttle all the way up, and whenever I press spacebar, this main engine is going to fire. Press spacebar again, it's going to go to this stage where these are going to fire. So in 3, 2, 1, we have ignition and we have liftoff. Alright, so everything's going good. I'm probably going to fast forward here in a second after the solid rocket boosters are spent, and we're going to fast forward till I get into orbit, and then from there we'll explain a little bit more. So as you can see, you're going to have to watch heat. These are going to heat up a little bit. If we had a bunch of these, that'd probably be bad, but since we only have these 2, we're good to go. And as soon as this fuel runs out, we're going to press spacebar right there, and it ejects them, and we're good to go. We can keep going. And this is the nav ball. You're going to want to pay attention to the nav ball pretty much throughout the duration of the flight, and you'll see why. It's the most important thing on the screen at any given time in orbit. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and get us up into orbit, speaking of that, and I'll come back to you. One thing I do need to point out though while we're here is you see this green circle with these little lines sticking off? The one that does not have the X in it, this one right here in particular, this is our prograde marker showing us the direction of our travel. Opposite to that on the nav ball, there is one that has an X on the inside. That is our retrograde, so that means the opposite way we're traveling, obviously. And this is the horizon on our nav ball. If we're pointing at the ground, that means we're pointing towards the surface of Kerbin, which sometimes you'll need to do that. If we're pointing straight up, that means we're pointing directly away. And it has the north marker, 90 degrees, things like that. The nav ball is very, very important. But again, I'll go ahead and come back whenever we are in orbit. Okay, so it does look like we are going to be able to make an orbit easy enough. We're going to have plenty of fuel. One thing to note is, like I was talking about earlier, there are maneuver nodes, flight planning that you can do in the game. That's something that you can, you mess around with it. Actually, you can get very precise. You can plan things out very well with this, but we're not going to do that in this episode. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel that out. That is something that is available to you at this point. So what I'm going to do is, it's not letting me do. Why is it not letting me warp? There it goes. Alright, I'm going to warp around to our apoapsis, which that means in our orbit that is the highest part of our orbit. And once we do achieve a stable orbit, there's going to be a periapsis, which is the lowest part. If you have those at the exact same altitude, that means you have a perfectly circular orbit, which is something you usually want to have. Sometimes you want a more eccentric orbit, but for the most part you want to have a circular orbit as much as you can, and you can do that by either using maneuver nodes or manually doing it yourself, which in this video that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and get us into an orbit and then come back. Alright, so I was able to get us into orbit. As you can see, it's about 136,000 meters, roughly, give or take a couple thousand meters, which isn't perfectly circular, but it is pretty damn close. It's pretty good for me. So we're in a stable orbit. We're not going to decay whatsoever. So there is docking and things like that in the game right now, but obviously we don't have anything to dock to, and this is just a basics video. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the different things on the nav ball. And right now, as you can see, we're pretty much pointed towards the horizon, so that is reflected on this. If we flip around and point in the direction that we're traveling away from, that is our retrograde marker. As you can see, we are pointing backwards, and obviously that's our prograde marker. If we wanted to be pointed south, we could point 180. Or if we wanted to point north, this one's easy. It has an orange line. That's the 0 degree marker. And for docking, that's very nice. You can either point north or south, and this makes it where you rotate on the north-south axis, so you're only spinning like this instead of the long way. But I think for now we're going to go ahead and show you how to deorbit, which is probably the simplest thing in the game. All you do is point in your retrograde marker. And once you stop spinning and flying like a noob like me, you'll be there. And you just add throttle. You add thrust in the opposite way you're traveling, and it's going to deorbit you. The thing about that is, though, as of right now, there is no friction simulated in the atmosphere. There is, however, atmospheric simulation, which will slow you down, but no friction. So you can pretty much come down wherever you want at any angle. And it won't do anything to harm you in that aspect. So bear in mind, though, they are planning on adding that. So if you get used to doing that, get stuck in your ways, it's going to come back to haunt you, and you're going to explode in the atmosphere on re-entry. But as of right now, that's not a thing we have to worry about. So we're going to go ahead and just deorbit ourselves and hopefully land in the ocean. That's what we're going to aim for. I'm going to drop this down to where we don't have a periapsis anymore, that it's inside the planet. There we go. Bring it down just a little bit more. Alright, we'll call that good. And what I typically do, since we are now going to deorbit, there's no doubt about that unless we do change that, I go ahead and get rid of that stage. Both of these are going to be coming down inside the planet's atmosphere. They will crash down, that'll be destroyed, and hopefully this will be safe. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward us until we get into the atmosphere, and about 70,000 meters, there we go. It's going to go to 1 times time warp, but we're going to go ahead and switch it to 4 times physical time warp just to save a little bit of time. You can deploy your parachute now, but it's not going to do anything until you get to 20,000 meters. And at that point it's going to deploy as a drag chute to slow you, and it's not going to actually completely open until you get about 500 meters off of the surface of the sea level. And this is represented as sea level and not your actual altitude above land. For that, you'd have to check the radar altimeter, which is right there. But for right now, we're just going to be hopefully landing over water. And here we go. And at 500 meters, you're going to see this chute open, hopefully, and hopefully we'll be going slow enough where it won't rip off. Yeah, see, I forgot about our physical time warping. That's something you don't want to do. It ripped the chute off. We was going slow enough for that to work, but unfortunately, I noobed it out and got our little Kerbal killed. But that is going to be the end of the video. I do appreciate you guys watching. If you like this kind of stuff and you want to see more of this stuff from me, go ahead and give me a thumbs up and let me know in the comments. But with that said, I appreciate you guys watching, and stay tuned for more.